it's crazy, but it's
You're watching Channel Z, the world's leading zombie apocalypse channel, broadcasting live from Studio Z.
Makes me act the way I do.
And hello, welcome to a very special live, at least for me. I'm in studio here at the Mix Center at ASU as part of the Zombie Apocalypse Medicine meeting for the Dr. Zed Show. And as always, I am your host, Dr. Zed, exploring evolutionary medicine in the apocalypse. Ordinarily, I would have my co-host, Athena Actipus, right here at the table with me. But I'm told that, actually, I have no idea what's happened to her. She may have joined a cult. She may be working on her first church of the microbiome. We hear all these rumors are swirling around. All we know is that there are some very unusual things afoot here at the Zombie Apocalypse Medicine meeting. So no co-host, but all is not lost. We're going to be talking about the apocalyptic pharmacy, drugs that we can use to protect ourselves, and some non-pharmacological ways to protect ourselves from the coming apocalypse. We have our returning expert, Jessica Brinkworth. She's a veteran of the Dr. Zed Show. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
I'm happy you're able to join us. And for those that have not had the pleasure of hearing from Dr. Brinkworth, she's an evolutionary anthropologist. She is an infectious disease expert. She knows all about the Black Death.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I know an
Right?
awful lot. Yeah, we just had a paper drop yesterday or the day before in Nature, where we identified a gene that appears to be affected by the Black Death outbreak specifically. Yeah. And is connected potentially to Crohn's disease and surviving generations. It's really exciting.
So truly apocalyptic stuff. Apocalypse of a different era. But it is fantastic that you have that expertise. And before we talk about that paper, take a moment to give us some love on the socials, smash that like button, tell your friends about the Dr. Zed Show and about ZAM and about Channel Z. It's super important to do that. It helps us fight off the zombie hordes. So yeah, a little minor paper in a lesser journal called Nature. I'm joking, of course. The recent Nature paper on the Black Death. This paper, Evolution of Immune Genes is Associated with the Black Death, came out completely timely. Great timing for this Dr. Zed Show. Tell us about that study.
Yeah, so that study is actually the outcome of about 13 years of work, starting with Luis Barrero and myself separately. And then we both ended up investigating plague in two very different ways thereafter. And so he went this route of working with a man named Hendrik Poinar, and they compared ancient DNA that they found in pre and post plague graveyards at a couple of sites in Europe, including like Denmark and England. And they identified some really big selective changes in people who died after the Black Death outbreak. And then I had some functional data where I've been doing like comparisons between populations of, how do people respond to plague? And we saw responses that mapped really, really well to these like genes that appeared to be under selection. So the upshot is there's two genes, one called ARAP2, which appears to be very active with after plague stimulation. And is thought to be that activity is thought to be very beneficial to curing plague, but also we tend to see it be very active in cases of Crohn's disease.
Whoa, so it has like a medical implication for nowadays. That's cool.
Yeah.
Hey, can we bring up a little picture of a little image of that Nature paper? Well, there it is.
It's a cast of many. It's a huge global
many, among which is our eminent Jessica Brinkworth.
Yeah,
so yeah, and I think I love the first sentence of that abstract, which is infectious diseases are among the strongest selective pressures. Maybe they are the strongest selective pressures driving human evolution. Maybe not making us human per se, but it has a relationship to our current diseases. So that's so cool that you did that. I'm call me impressed. So yeah, so thanks for bringing up that image. That's good stuff. So turning attention, well, maybe we shouldn't quite pivot quite so fast. Let's talk about what doctors did back during the Black Death to protect themselves. They had some personal protective equipment, didn't they?
Yeah, they had PPE of their own, a very terrifying PPE. If you were a plague patient, it's literally the last thing you'd want to see is this giant leather mask that was
pretty
used.
Crazy stuff.
There it is. Yeah, to clear out. So the beak of that mask would have contained lots of herbs and spices and things like that. And the idea was that it was cleaning out miasmas that could be breathed in.
I don't like to breathe miasmas.
Well,
But listen, I mean, so as far as if it was an airborne disease, this would make a whole lot of sense, wouldn't it? So if the zombie virus is airborne, then maybe a mask with a filter, that they were way ahead of their time, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely, because pneumonic plague is a thing. So it's the same bacteria, but if you breathe it in, then you end up with a much more severe, I mean, when it comes to plague, it's hard to describe something as being much more severe. The mortality rate of getting it from a flea is like 70%, but it's 90% if you breathe it in. And so this would have been for people treating plague victims, this would have been a really important piece of protection. The whole body covering as well. Like if you look at the whole of one of these images, it's like gloves, boots, like you cannot touch the skin of this person.
Yeah.
So.
And I went to your website this morning and saw the picture of your lab doing the rapid COVID testing. And it had some similarities to this bird mask, didn't they? I mean,
yeah,
so
thanks
for bringing that up. And Dave, I appreciate your comment. As far as my appearance goes, you probably noticed the circles under my eyes. I had a little trouble sleeping last night. That's true. And I woke up feeling maybe just a tiny bit under the weather. I don't think it's a plague. I don't think it's anything important, really. I just think it's allergies.
Yeah, you look a little flushed, hey? Like a little, and maybe you've got a little bit of a rash going on there?
You know, prepping for these important, podcasts, zombie casts, whatever we're going to call this, it gets me excited, brings a little color to my cheeks. So yes, but thank you for noticing. Yeah, I think I look pretty good.
You should take it easy after this, Dr. Zed.
Maybe I'll take a nap. That's true. So how do we, with the zombie plague, this coming zombie plague that may happen, maybe it's already happening, how shall we protect ourselves if it's really transmitted by a bite? Now you mentioned the Black Death, airborne, probably not a deal. That's a flea-borne. A bite from a flea transmits that. For the coming zombie plague, what I hear is that it is transmitted perhaps by biting. So maybe we should actually have some kind of a mouth hole covering to protect ourselves. Maybe like what they had back in in medieval times, like a frog helm, which is a nice face covering. What do you think about that? What do you think about that, Jessica?
I mean, I feel like you have to be really good with a sword to get in there, right? That's not such a bad idea, I suppose. Definitely keep teeth in it.
I'm thinking, though, for the plague, this coming plague, that's going to both prevent bites. You can't bite if you're wearing it, and you can't be bitten. They can't get to your brain if you're wearing something like that. So maybe that's the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, are you going to be like that? Is your whole body going to be covered like this? Or is it just, are we just worried about the head? So insofar that's going to protect you from being stabbed in the head, say if you are.
We're just trying to be evidence-based and scientific about this.
Okay.
I'm just thinking about covering the transmission of the zombie plague that somehow involves the mouth. Now, I guess we can relate this maybe to popular culture. Hannibal Lecter, for instance, he had a special little mouth covering. Let's bring that up. Frog helms. I love this. The comment from Danielle here, the 5-minute medievalist. Plague masks were an early modern invention made for the recurrences of plague. So that was after the huge initial outbreak. Frog helms, not for plague per se, but I'm just thinking about what we can do. I think we have to draw on our past medical expertise and think about how people have dealt with very serious plagues in the past. So
I love the notion of a jousting plague.
That's right. Jousting plague is something else. So let's, just as far as if that's too much, maybe there's a simpler face covering, one that was featured in the Silence of the Lambs, perhaps. Hannibal Lecter. What do you think? Would that be too onerous to put on our children, for instance, at school? I mean, I guess I can't imagine parents allowing their kids to wear a face covering at school. Like who would imagine something like that?
Right? Yeah. Except it bears a pretty stunning resemblance to masks that are already mandated in school settings. Right. So we do have head coverings that are mandated in school settings.
So I appreciate that we talked a little bit about this yesterday, didn't we? Remarkably, I think for the zombie plague, we're going to need to have something more substantial than a cloth mask. But for COVID-19, that worked pretty well. And we're worried, though, aren't we, that parents and some people in the population, they don't seem to think that this biting problem really is a problem. Maybe they don't even believe zombies exist, right? Maybe they have a hard time conceptualizing that's important to wear these face coverings.
Or that they were here and they're gone now. Like there are no more zombies. It's over.
Maybe the zombie apocalypse is just, it's a done deal. Maybe it never happened. Maybe it doesn't exist. But you made the point that in some school settings, a face covering is mandated, didn't you?
Yeah. So absolutely. In the case of, say, like football, right?
Football, huh?
Football is, at schools and in football clubs.
So listen,
for children, because
we seem to have a problem with face coverings that are surgical or medical, but for football, we are all over this. Think about that. They have a mouth guard, they've got a face shield, they've got a visor. If a zombie tries to attack the brain, these kids are going to be protected. They can't bite or be bitten, at least on their head. So maybe this is the way to go. But you wanted to, I appreciate you pointing out that kind of remarkable paradox, right? That we don't like the little cloth mask, but hey, in the schools, we have no problem with kids wearing helmets on the playing field.
It's sort of hard to imagine a set of circumstances that could be any more difficult than the last couple of years that we've been through apocalypse wise, right? Like it's really difficult to imagine that the number of people affected, which in the United States is about 1.5 million, and that's probably an undercount, is low. Like that's not enough. But there are watershed moments in our culture where safety mechanisms are adopted universally, and that's it. And I think that's the case with football helmets. It's absolutely the case with goalie masks, right? So prior to 1959, 1960, if you were a goalie, a lot of coaches in the NHL would prohibit you from wearing a mask. And there had been other attempts to do this and make it rigorous by players in the 1930s that were rejected. But something really big happened with the advent of television, where you could watch a game on TV, and the whole nation of Canada tuned in to watch a Montreal Canadiens game in November of 1959 and saw the goalie Jacques Plante take a hit to the face in 3 minutes. 3 minutes into the game, he had a shot to his face so bad that it broke his nose, broke his jaw, it broke his sinuses. It was a really big thing. But Jacques Plante was a really interesting guy because he'd been wearing a mask in practice. He just wasn't allowed to wear it on the ice. And he'd been wearing a mask in practice because goalies got hit all the time. It's the most dangerous position in the game. And he had a case of sinusitis stemming from all of these constant puck hits to the face, where he was out for 13 games in a season all in a row, and he lost a lot of money. So what he did was that he had his doctor make him a fiberglass mask. And he went off ice after this hit, got stitched up, and came back, and it stunned the audience. People were really upset that he was masked. It was a big deal, but 10 years later, every goalie in the NHL was wearing masks, and masks were mandated. So,
what do you think about Diana Fleischman's comment that maybe masks or protective gear in general make people take even more risks than they otherwise would? This is the idea that if you're a bike helmet, you're going to weave in and out of traffic. You're going to feel invulnerable. And so you get.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's possible. But Jacques Plante was a really interesting character who could be used as an example of how actually he ended up taking fewer risks because he put the mask on. So he was a goalie player that was play in the crease. He would exit the crease and play with the players and come back, which is very unusual, or at least at that time was. And because he was taking those risks, he was more likely to get hit in the face and therefore wore a mask. And he was a huge mask proponent after the fact. So I think in his case, it's probably backwards. So I think in most cases, I think for people, you're maybe looking at a mix of both. Can I show you what this guy looked like after this hit?
Yes.
Okay, hold on.
Let's take a look.
Yeah. So here it is. Are you going to see that I was actually looking at a Super Mario game on here? So that's the mask. Can you see?
Oh yeah, it looks like Hannibal.
Too. Sorry.
Halloween.
Yeah. So it is kind of. Oh God, damn it. Okay, you can see out my window and everything else, but can you see?
We got it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how badly he was injured. It broke his nose, broke his sinus, and he had this very Jason-like mask that he came out onto the ice with after.
Mm-hmm. Well, since time is
of the essence
here, let's move on a little bit and talk about zombicidal interventions.
Sure.
Can we think about drugs that might work against the zombie plague, drawing from our recent experience with the most recent pandemic?
Yeah. So one drug that works very well for prevention are the vaccines, the mRNA vaccines. So
Yeah.
it
And I
does.
should mention, the two of us are vaccine boosters, aren't we?
We're absolutely boosters. Boosters. It doesn't prevent you from getting it. It prevents you from dying. So you can still be like zombie infected, but not zombified. So that would be the difference, right? And then there's two drugs, Paxlovid and remdesivir, which interfere. The first one interferes with the actual transcription of the genome of this virus when it's in your when you're infected. So this is after you get infected. And the second one prevents it from undergoing some really necessary changes to be turned into a virion, a baby virus, and released. And so those two drugs are effective in lowering replication numbers of viruses when you're infected, but they don't stop you from being infected, and people can be on them and still die. So you have to be careful. Like there's none of these three drugs we just discussed are a cure-all. So
Right.
the best option is to simply not get it in the first place.
We don't know exactly what form the new zombie virus, if it is a virus, is going to take, or whether vaccine will be the appropriate thing. But we talked a little bit about rabies. We have talked about rabies as being a very zombie-like virus, right? And we actually do have a vaccine against rabies. I've just did a quick survey of the audience here, and some people have actually been vaccinated against rabies, but not everybody. I certainly haven't been. But we do mandate rabies vaccines for some organisms, individuals, things, right?
Because the primary vector for most people are their pets. So we mandate it for dogs. And if your dog is caught biting someone, and is not vaccinated for rabies, most jurisdictions will order that dog is put down. So that's how it works. It's the threat of the death of the dog is what keeps us going back for rabies vaccines. And not only that, we have great rabies vaccination across our pet population. Apparently it's really, really good. And they're expensive.
Yeah.
8 rabies shots.
Real costs, right? Costs and benefits if they're super expensive. And poor Dave Lumberg Kendrick had 8 rabies shots as a kid.
Rabies shots.
What sort of dog situation were you? You just kept getting bitten. Oh.
No, it was just those for the one bite.
Oh, I see. Yeah, the whole series of rabies shots.
For the one bite. Oh wow! Did they have to shoot those into your stomach, Dave?
No, it was after the stomach thing. So it was
okay.
Booty, and then this rest in the arm.
So the post exposure treatment for you get the immunoglobulin. It's a little bit different from a vaccine, but yeah. So that's what Dave is talking to us about. So yeah, interesting stuff. What if you're not into vaccines and you don't believe in helmets that are going to protect you from being bitten, and you think that, say, maybe like Joe Rogan, that all you got to do is eat the right foods, be healthy, kind of work out a little bit, eat some wild caught game and shoot your own elk and that sort of thing. Is that the way to go? What do you think?
Yeah, I would say that if you think that you're an incredibly moralistic elitist and that's total bullshit. And here's why. It's completely unreasonable to expect that in a nation with such huge wealth disparities, right? With so much of the, circulating money sitting in the bank accounts of about 1% of the population, that most people could have, organic vegetables every day, or are able to even afford to eat a reasonably healthy diet. I think a lot of people can do the best that they can. The majority of the population is not in a position to eat the way that Joe Rogan does. So
to be clear, one should eat good food.
Yeah, absolutely.
One really should chew on some delicious, healthy, organically raised carrots. I'm not sure. I think it's a baby carrot.
Oh.
And lollipops. We have to be thoughtful about the sorts of things that we eat. So I'm not going to guess that. But yeah, for a public health challenge as grave as the zombie apocalypse, we can't just tell people to lose 20 pounds and eat organic food. It's probably not going to be enough.
I think if you have a nation where a large portion of the population is working shift work for very little money and is living without a minimum wage, how are you going to justify telling them that they need to get their elk from the butcher? It just it's a really cruel thing to say and do. And it's also
Cruel
just
to
like,
the elk too.
what's that?
Maybe cruel to the elk too,
Maybe
depending on
cruel
one's
to the
point of
elk,
view.
too. Yeah, maybe. Anyway, the point of this, right, really, if you wanted to have like the thing that's reasonable is that you really want people to not be eating a diet of Funyuns.
Funyuns.
Provided that we're
I've
living.
never been fond of Funyuns.
Yeah, I don't like them really either. But yeah, it's like so. But provided we're living in a nation with such great income disparities and with such widespread health inequity, simply telling someone to not eat Funyuns when they're cheaper than healthier foods, or when they're more available and closer to where they live, and or they're in their workplace where they're working 12 hours a day, not cool.
Okay. Like I said, certain foods are delicious. Others not so much, right? Now, suppose I was so unlucky enough to actually be infected with the zombie virus. Just imagine that this was the case. We have had success with rabies, treating some individuals with full-blown rabies encephalitis, putting them on a ventilator, sedating the crap out of them, paralyzing them, and keeping them in a coma for a certain number of weeks. So there's hope, isn't there, that if someone does get infected with the zombie virus, that we might have a medical treatment for them. Something like that. What do you think about this sedation approach for rabies? Have you heard of that?
Yeah. So a sedation approach, I think, for anybody who's in the ICU is not necessarily all it's cracked up to be. If you're in a position in the ICU where you need to be intubated and sedated, therefore, as a result, you are in really serious condition. Most people who end up on a ventilator get damaged by the ventilator. The likelihood that you're going to survive goes down the longer you're on it. It's really nasty. And sedation itself, I mean, from what I understand, sedation itself is also kind of nightmarish. People are sometimes not fully put under, they have terrible hallucinations. So it doesn't, the last place I would want to be, period, unless I absolutely had to be there, would be in an ICU, intubated and ventilated, or intubated and sedated. So
we will keep an eye on that topic.
What's that?
Yeah. So we'll keep a close eye on that topic. I wanted to mention that, as far as rabies goes, we've learned that in some places in South America where there are vampire bats, a lot of the local farmers actually have antibodies against the rabies virus, suggesting that not everybody dies after exposure to rabies. And so maybe it's possible. We don't know whether this treatment of putting people on ICUs and sedating them and keeping them in a coma is actually what made them survive. Perhaps some people are going to survive anyway.
Yeah,
and
that
of course, we'll never have a randomized controlled trial to know that. But your point is a good one. It is well taken that oversedation is a problem. The brain actually is important in coordinating and orchestrating an immune response when you're terribly sick. We can't just turn off the brain as doctors and expect that everything is going to go well. And we've noticed over the past decade or two that this oversedation phenomenon is a real problem. We're turning patients into zombies in the intensive care unit. And something that we can do to fix that is to dial back the sedation. That seems to actually improve outcomes. You get better survival. You get less ICU delirium. And many people think that they're being tortured when they're in the ICU and they're paralyzed, especially if they wake up under paralysis. Of course, that's an under sedation problem, but getting exposure to too much sedation is its own issue. And people actually oftentimes have dreams and they end up doing poorly, both as a result of being in an intensive care unit and after they're discharged. So this is something we're learning from recent critical care work. And the solution here is to actually sedate people a little bit less. We want to minimize or use just what's necessary, but nothing more than that.
So can I ask you a question about that? Is it possible that when you're sedating people in the ICU and you're intubating them and you're giving them steroids or any number of other sort of supportive treatments, that you're actually creating the image of a patient that's going to survive? Like that you can make their overall vital profile look really positive when in reality, the outcome's not going to change?
Yeah. We are so powerful in medicine that we are able to make people look okay, at least on paper. Like we can get the printout of their laboratory tests. We can get their vital signs looking good. Blood pressure can look normal. Temperature can be okay. The sodium, potassium can be relatively normal. We can fix things like calcium. And yet many of these patients that we can make look alive are actually probably going to die no matter what we do. So our medical interventions are so powerful that we're actually creating a class of people who are potentially can be thought of as being undead in the ICU. And that's not what we want, right? We want actual living people to be discharged from the ICU. And just because we can make people look good on paper doesn't mean that they're alive in a way that's meaningful. To be serious about this. Yeah. And you brought up one other topic, which I thought was kind of interesting. This idea that you can get a certain kind of immortality.
Yeah.
Right? Tell us about what you were thinking with that.
So I think like a lot of other people, my life has been touched by organ donation, in that like I've had very close relatives that have needed life-saving organ donations. And from my standpoint, when you are a living being who is mostly cancer-free or free of certain diseases, you can achieve a kind of semi-immortality by donating your organs. That your organs, when you're done using them, are a kind of an almost sort of like life after death, right? That you can go on persisting, helping someone else live. So to me, it's one of the kindest things that you can do, but on the side, you kind of get to live a little longer.
It's a really important point. It's one that I think is actually very important. I am absolutely a proponent of organ donation, and organ transplantation is a kind of life after death, isn't it?
Yeah.
And of course, Dave is maybe it's the cult leader speaking here that he wants to donate his brain and achieve some sort of immortality in that way.
Yeah, actually, Jason brings up something super, super important. Bone marrow, which you could donate right now, right? That's another thing. Bone marrow, you could donate it right now, and it still is sort of like a little bit like life after death because you're reseeding someone's bone marrow in the process, but like you don't have to wait to die to do it. You could do that, and sign up for a registry today. And it's huge. Yeah. It's a huge change in people's lives.
Of course, the other kind of immortality you can get is if you are perhaps a cell line from cancer, right?
Yeah,
they achieve a certain kind of immortality.
Poor Henrietta Lacks, yeah. But that's it. Okay, so from the bone marrow perspective, if you're reseeding someone's bone marrow and they go on to have children, you should expect that there might be even bone marrow chimeras that show up. Like you could hypothetically be contributing to like genetic lineages that go on later, depending on who you seed and when. So that, like, there's some interesting things that are worth, I think, thinking about. Like, just
wait. So you're saying that some of those cells will make it into their?
Sorry, say that again.
Some of those cells will somehow. How does that work?
You can end up with chimerisms through a couple of different routes. But if you were to say be implanted into someone who was in their reproductive years and was a woman, there's often like trading and transgenerational immunity that happens between mothers and babies, some of it through breast milk. So for example, if you were to be seeded into a woman who then had a baby and she was now making your B cells, when she transmits immunoglobulin A, which is an antibody from, that B cells are producing through her breast milk to seed the stomach of her child, her intestines for her child. And that will determine how that child makes their lymphocyte repertoire, et cetera. It's you, right? Your DNA that has done that in that baby, which is pretty.
That's crazy. So
we're
bringing it full circle.
Sorry, exactly. And there's other options for actual chimerisms. I'm not sure that very many of them have been demonstrated, but it is something that has been discussed.
Yeah.
So, but that's absolutely one
Fascinating stuff. Wow. Well, we are a little short on time. We've taken this from plagues that cause us to die or perhaps become undead to this idea that there's a certain sort of immortality and rebirth that can happen. Remarkable stuff. So I tell you what, this has been an amazing and super fun Dr. Zed show. Thanks so much for joining us. This is going to be the first of 3 Dr. Zeds for this Zombie Apocalypse Medicine Meeting 2022. And thanks so much for our special plague expert, Jessica Brinkworth, for joining us again.
Absolutely. My
pleasure. A truly apocalyptic discussion. And there'll be more. So tune in tomorrow for the science of disasters, decay, and drugs. And stay tuned for more exciting programming here on the Zombie Apocalypse Medicine Meeting 2022.
And if the whole world says that we're crazy,